everyone, today we're going to take a look at 4-5, which is completing the square. As usual, pause the video when needed to go ahead and make sure you can take your notes or give a try on any of the problems you want to work out yourself. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for example 1, here we have solve x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 64 using the square root property. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is go ahead and rewrite our trinomial as a perfect square, since it is. This factors out to x plus 7, which is also known as x plus 7 squared. Then we're going to go ahead and use the square root property to get rid of our exponent of 2 and take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 7 equals plus or minus 64. And that is because when we take the square root of 64, we have two possible solutions. We can have positive 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. But so is when we multiply negative 8 by itself. Negative times a negative equals a positive. So that is why we have a plus minus here. So we end up with x equals negative 7 plus or minus 8. So we're going to go ahead and write that as two equations. We have negative 7 plus 8 and negative 7 minus 8. So when we go ahead and simplify those, we get x equals 1 and x equals negative 15. We could check this by plugging in the values to make sure that we get true statements. And we do get two true statements, so we know both of these answers work. Here's you try for example 1. Go ahead and solve x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 25 using the square root property. All right, let's go ahead and look at this one here. This is a perfect square. This is going to end up being x minus 8 squared equals 25. I do know it's a minus sign because here is a minus and this is a perfect square. And it's actually double the value of our a and b values. So we have x minus 8 squared equals 25. We're going to take the square root of both sides, and we end up with x minus 8 equals plus or minus 5. So we go ahead and add 8 to both sides. So x equals 8 plus or minus 5, which would end up into 13 and 3, which our answer is C. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at example 2. I'm going to do the same thing here. We're going to go ahead and rewrite it as a perfect square in quadratic form. So we get x minus 2 squared equals 13. We're going to take the square root of both sides to get x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 13. And we can't actually do anything with the square root of 13. We can't simplify it. We can't do anything with it. So we're going to leave it as is. And we get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 13 by adding 2 to both sides. We can write this as two equations. 2 plus square root of 13, 2 minus square root of 13. If they want your answer in radical form, either of these would work, just depending on what program they're using and if you have a plus minus sign. If there is no plus minus sign, you do have to write both of them. And then if they want you to go ahead, you can also go ahead and round this to a decimal to the second decimal place or to the 100th place by using a calculator. It just again depends on the question asking for what format they would like the answer in. So we get about 5.61 and about negative 1.61. You can check these by graphing or by plugging in and seeing if it would work. Or you can go ahead and graph the equation by moving 13 to the other side, and we get x squared plus minus 4x minus 9. And you would go ahead and graph this and see if it lands at that point. If you're using Desmos, it'll be really good. It'll have it probably rounded to 2 decimal points or to the 3rd decimal point. So it should be fine. All right, go ahead and try x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 8. by using the square root property. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here. So we already have, this is a perfect square trinomial. It will become x minus 2 squared equals 8. So we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we get x minus 2 equals 2 square root of 2. I can simplify the square root of 8 because 8 can be rewritten as 4 times 2. So that would be the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, which is 2 square root of 2. Now we're going to go ahead and add 2 to both sides. And we get x equals 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 2. So in this case, they are asking you to leave it in a radical form, and they do have the plus minus option. So our answer here is C. All right, so we are going to be looking at completing the square. And this is a way to go from pretty much, it's a way to solve a problem, but it's also a way to go from standard form to vertex form, which we will address more next class. To complete the square for any quadratic expression of the form x squared plus bx, follow the steps below. Step 1, find half of b and the coefficient of x. Square that result and then add that result to both sides or to the equation. So we're going to take half of b, square it, and add it. The reason for that is because when we do this, we are also assuming that there is a 1 for the a value over here, that when we get a plus b squared and a minus b squared, depending on the coefficient of our b term. It is a very special pattern. The reason we're halving it is because if we take half of that, we have our b value since we're using a as 1. So taking a look here, we're going to find the value of c that makes the statement x squared plus 12x a perfect square. So we're going to take half of 12, which is 6, square that number. 6 squared is 36. We are then going to add that, so we get x squared plus 12x plus 36. And this can be written as x plus 6 squared. All right, next we have find the value of c. This is a u-try. So I'm going to give you a moment. If you want to go ahead and pause the video, you can again as needed. All right, so we're going to follow the same steps. We're going to take half of our b value, which is 6. So we're going to do 6 divided by 2, which is 3. We are going to square 3, and that gets us 9. So x squared plus 6x plus 9. And this is going to be also x plus 3 squared. So this number here from the first step is also very useful when it comes to writing it in the squared format. So our answer is A. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at answering a problem by using completing the square. You would use this when your trinomial is not a perfect square, and that we need to go ahead and take care of it. So we're going to go ahead and move the 12 to the other side. We're then going to take half of 4 and square it. So half of 4 is 2, 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. And we're going to go ahead and rewrite it as x plus 2 squared equals 16. We're going to take the square root of both sides to get x plus 2 equals plus or minus 4. And then we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. So now that we have negative 2 plus or minus 4. And we have our two resulting equations, negative 2 plus 4 and negative 2 minus 4. And when we simplify, we get 2 and negative 6 for our answer. All right, go ahead and try solving x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0 by completing the square. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. The first thing we're going to do is subtract 8 from both sides. So we have x squared plus 6x equals negative 8. All right, we're going to take half of our b value, which is 3, and 3 squared equals 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. And we're going to ahead and rewrite this as our perfect square, x plus 3 squared equals 1. We're going to take the square root of both sides. And we get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 1. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And we get x equals negative 3 plus or minus 1. So plus 1 would get me negative 2. Minus 1 would get me negative 4, which is B. All right, so now we have an example that's a little bit more work involved. You are probably going to work with fractions in these cases, that we're going to have an a value that's not equal to 1. So there's an extra step involved here for us to go ahead and do this. We're going to first go ahead and divide everything by the a value. So we're going to divide everything by 3. When we do that, our a value now becomes a 1, and then we're left with negative 2/3 and negative 1/3 for a and c. We're going to go ahead and move over the 1/3 to the other side so that we have x squared minus 2/3 x equals 1/3. And then we're going to take half of 2/3 and square it, or negative 2/3. And when we do that, we're going to get 1/9. That's because we're going to get negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So then when we square this, we get positive 4 over 36, which simplifies to 1/9. We want the simplest form. It's going to make things easier on us if we are using the simplest forms. So we're going to add 1/9 to both sides. When we do that, we get x minus 1, and then we're going to go ahead and rewrite here in perfect square. X minus 1/3 equals 4/9. And that is because on the previous slide we had 1/3 plus 1/9. This is the same thing as saying 3/9 plus 1/9. And as we add fractions, we add the numerators as long as the denominators are the same. So then we're going to go ahead and square root both sides. So we get x minus 1/3 equals plus or minus 2/3. We're going to add 1/3 to both sides. So now we have our two equations of 1/3 plus 2/3 and 1/3 minus 2/3. And when we simplify, we get 1 and negative 1/3 for our solution set. All right, here is a try me. It's a 2x squared plus 11x plus 15 equals 0. Solved by completing the square. I'll give you guys a moment to go ahead and pause and work that out. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here. So our first step we're going to do is divide everything by 2. When we do that, we get x squared plus 11/2 x plus 15 over 2. You might be tempted to turn these things into decimals. I would not. It's a lot of this will be easier actually looking at them as fractions. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 15/2 from both sides. So we have plus 11/2 x equals negative 15/2. We're then going to take our b term, which is 11 over 2. We're going to multiply it by 1/2 because that's the same thing as dividing by 2. and square it. When we do that, we have 11 over 4 squared, which is 121 over 16. So we're going to add 121 over 16 to both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and write this as our perfect square. So we're going to get x plus 11/4 squared. I'm going to show you the step here. We actually get negative 120 over 16 plus 121 over 16. And we get negative 120 by doing, I need to multiply top and bottom by 8. So negative 15 times 8 is negative 120. 2 times 8 is 16. Now I have the same denominators. So we can actually go ahead and add them. And when we add them, we're left with 1/16. So now we're going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. And so it's really nice here that I can actually see that these are both perfect squares, which makes it a lot easier to deal with. So we get x plus 11/4 equals the square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 16 is 4. So we get plus or minus 1/4. So we're going to subtract 11/4 from both sides. And so now we have x equals negative 11/4 plus or minus 1/4. So if we add a 4th, we end up with 10 over 4. We end up with negative 10 over 4. If we do the minus, we get negative 12 over 4, which is the same thing as negative 3. Negative 10 over 4 is the same thing as negative 5 over 2. So our answer is A. All right, and for our last example, we have an equation with imaginary solution, meaning we will have I in our answer. So we have x squared plus 4x plus 11 equals 0. We're going to head and solve by completing the square. So we're going to head and subtract 11 from both sides so that we have x squared plus 4x equals negative 11. We're going to take half of our b value, which is 4, so half of 4 is 2, and square it. 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. And we get x plus 2 squared equals negative 7. We're going to take the square root of both sides and get x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 7. The only thing we can do is actually factor out I, or square root of the square root, so we get plus or minus I square root of 7. And then subtract 2 from both sides. So our answer here is negative 2 plus I square root of 7 and negative 2 minus I square root of 7. You might also, again, see that written the same way as it is here. It just depends on how they would like to see the answer. All right, go ahead and solve x squared plus 4x plus 5 equals 0 by completing the square. I'll give you a moment to pause the video. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here. We have x squared plus 4x, and we're going to go ahead and subtract 5 from both sides, and so that we get negative equals negative 5. We're going to take half of our b value, which is 4, So half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4, so we're going to add 4 to both sides. And so we end up with x plus 2 squared equals -1. We're then going to take the square root of both sides to get x plus 2 equals the square root of -1. And when we do that, we get x plus 2 equals plus or minus I. Oh, I forgot my 2. And then we're going to head subtract 2 from both sides. And we get x equals -2 plus or minus I. And when we separate those into two equations, we get -2 minus I and -2 plus I, which is our answer choice of D. All right, and that is the end of the lesson. I will see you guys next time.